And we're back here once again with another episode of the MSK Show. And this is going to be episode 126. And in this episode of the MSK Show, I'm going to be having a conversation with content creator, The Culture Nerd. It's going to be his second appearance on this show, actually. And last time we didn't get a chance to talk about comics or a few other things. And I was like, you know what? It's 2025. You know, the year's starting off pretty good unless you live in LA right now, which is probably hell.
Unfortunately. Yeah. We on our show this last week, my co-host Michael, he's from LA, and we basically decided that LA is pretty much what the 2005 Constantine movie displayed it hell as, and he was like, "That's exactly what it looks like." So,
like, I think if you live in that part of California anymore, you just have to essentially have just told God, if you are religious, I'm selling my soul to the devil right now, because there's no changing these people. I don't get why people do that. Either there's two ways to look at it. You accepted that this is where you want to live and you're okay with the bad leadership, or you just fed up with the bad leadership and you actually want to leave. Now, that's easier said than done, because if you will know, just packing up and moving is pretty hard, considering the fact that moving itself is hard nowadays, and getting a place to live. If you have family, it's pretty hard. But like, a lot of the people that live there voted for this guy. They vote for all these horrible people. Like, even though I'm not a liberal myself at all, there has to be better liberals out there. There has to be. There were some decent liberals in the past. Are they just scraping the bottom of the barrel now at this point just to get this guy?
It's a weird thing, because so I grew up in San Diego. I have family in LA, and when all this started happening, I immediately texted everybody. I'm like, "Hey, is everyone okay? Is everyone doing all right?" And they're like, "We've been here for 5 generations. We know what parts of LA not to live in." And I was like, "Okay, solid answer. Good answer." And they were like, "We're fine. We're good." And growing up, I mean, you kind of just get used to the politics of the area, whether you subscribe to it or not. It's just how it is. But it seems like in the last 20 years, maybe less, the politics in California have been so focused on all of these political, social justices movements and all these things, that they focus so much on diverting all of their money to those things, and they left none of the money necessary to keep the infrastructure going. And that's why you have like the canals and everything empty, because they basically cut all of their funding away from these things. And then finally, when the shit hits the fan, here they are, and the whole thing's burning because they didn't check that they had their water supplies ready. They didn't have check. You don't get fires like this in the winter unless you've done something very wrong.
And I remember just yesterday, he put out this tweet, and it's crazy because I think some of these guys have social media managers, but someone like him, he's posting some of this stuff himself. He's not like a person where he's an old man where he's lost his brain like Joe Biden. He can definitely talk coherently. If it doesn't sound all good and it's not smart and he's pretty much a moron, but he can certainly type on his phone. This man typed out a bunch of facts, and everything was fact checked by Community Notes. This is all lies. I just don't understand. He could literally just go, "Hey, I'm sorry for what I did. I didn't do my due diligence at checking our water supply and checking to see where it needed to go." A little, even though it wouldn't fix anything, it would show that, hey, you're willing to take the blame for what happened, because obviously if he runs the state, he gets to have all the blame anyway, right? Or the praise if he did anything good. It should never even get this bad, as you said. Like, why are people, apparently for a state that apparently, is all a bunch of liberals that claim about environmental control and climate change, that this ended up happening? You think the people that are talking about helping the climate and fucking talking about, helping the environment out would actually do something to potentially make sure that these fires are never going to happen? It's ridiculous. This should be unacceptable for people.
It really is, and it's such a wild thing, because when you look at it, you look at like the history of all these social decisions that they made for their politics, and we're going to close down our desalination plants because they're dangerous for the environment. And it's like, okay, well, you just closed off the most untapped resource. You're on the ocean. Just use the salinization plants to get your water supply, not be constantly in droughts. But they closed them out because they didn't want to negatively impact the environment. And then they stopped cutting down dead trees because it was
I remember that,
the environment. And it's like, you basically you neuter yourself by saying, okay, we're not going to have enough water, and we're also going to leave a bunch of dry brush everywhere. It's like, okay, so this is why this is happening, because you guys kept trying to say we're going to do what's best for the environment, but even the environment has ways of dealing with this thing, and they don't exist anymore because we're already there. So either we're going to clean up after ourselves, or we're going to accept the fact that nature will eventually purge the whole area with fire, because that's what it always does. So it's such an insane thing to think about, that these people with good intentions shot themselves in the foot.
And then now it cost so many people their homes, their lives, essentially. I remember there was one video I saw that I was almost like, man, I usually don't let the videos get to me, but like this one really hurt. I'm pretty sure maybe you saw it too. This 91-year-old guy that lived in Pasadena lost everything. And the 91-year-old guy was like, you know what? I'm 91 and I'll still rebuild. It's like, man probably has like maybe 9 years left to live. Man probably is only going to live like 100 years old. And he just lost everything. Like, all because the incompetence of leadership, a person just lost everything. And a lot of people did. Everyone just lost everything they've ever owned, even their cars. They had to leave them, or potentially they got broken into, or, you know, I don't know what even happened to them at this point, you know?
It's just such a wild thing. Like, the more I look into it, the more I'm just like, no, I'm
just glad you left.
Well, I mean, my family's still down there and it sucks, but like I left because I couldn't afford to live there. Like,
yeah, it's expensive as hell.
It's just too damn much. And every once in a while I always would flirt with the idea of going back, and then things like this happen and I'm like, I'm happy I'm not there.
I actually went to San Diego last year around July. It's great out there. I like San Diego.
I like San Diego a lot.
The area I was in was great. Everything felt super compact, but it was never like hard to find something. I think the only issue why I wouldn't live there is what you just said. Price. Like, there were rents. It had a thing called leasing apartments, and I just went to the guy and just asked him, just because I don't live there, but how much? He was like, $2,000 for rent. It's like, what? Yeah, no.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's pretty standard down there. I mean, that's just what it is. But I mean, so to kind of put it in perspective, when my dad bought the house that we grew up in, he paid $180 for it, and when he sold it for $890. So that's kind of the perspective of how much things changed over the course of the time that I grew up.
That's insane. Your dad almost became a millionaire just from selling his house he bought for like $180K.
Right, but the problem was California had so much taxes, especially if you're leaving the state, that they raped him with taxes. So he didn't get most of it because of how stupid their system was. Where, oh yeah, you made this much money off of it. We're going to take more than half of it because of taxes, because you're trying to leave.
God, I hate the state so much. And the whole voter ID thing too. It's like, now no voter IDs. It's crazy. You can't buy alcohol. You can't get a credit card. You can't even have a bank account. You can't almost do anything without an ID. But yeah, you can vote.
But you can vote and choose the laws of the land that prevent you from doing these other things.
What in the world? Yeah, hey, young kids, you have to have an ID to go to a liquor store and buy alcohol. But you know what? You sure can vote on policies that may affect us all. It's like, I just don't get how people just have lost all sane of reason of logic just so they could just, go along with bullshit. It's a crazy thing, actually.
They do it just to keep in power. They know that if there's, this last election, whether you voted for him or not, you realized very quickly that the majority of the country basically said we're tired of the bullshit. So you have places like California who realize,
I voted for Trump. I did.
Yeah, they're basically, you see places like California where they realized if we don't put laws like this in effect, we will be ousted tomorrow. So they did this so that they could basically pad their ability to stay there.
Yeah. So
the only reason why you would basically make a law that breaks the law is because you don't want the law to fuck you. That's really what it is. So I see it and I'm just like, yeah, this is insane. I just,
it's really hard. Nationwide rejecting. I've never seen anything like that in my entire life. I've never seen a presidential candidate like her basically just get rejected by the entire country.
Yeah.
That's insane. I've never seen that in my entire life. That was just just shocking. I had no words. I was like, damn, you must be the most unliked person on the entire history of the United States to be just no swing states. That's really important. Swing states are almost how you win an election and just in general. That's why everyone tries to conquer them. They're the thing that can turn the election. She won 0. I think she's the only presidential candidate to win like no swing states ever. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was such a wild thing because like I'm old enough to say that when I first voted, it was Bush. He was president.
Okay.
His re-election. So I remember the first time he came into office, and you had the Bush versus Gore, and then you had the hanging Chad thing from Florida, because it wasn't pushed all the way through, and that was how everyone was like, we should do electronic voting now because the paper ballots are inconsistent and blah blah blah. And I had a teacher once, a political economics teacher, who basically described politics as a pendulum, where what you tend to get was the pendulum would swing with the cultural zeitgeist and go one way or the other. And 9 times out of 10, every time it would swing toward the Republicans would win the next 2. And then it would swing back to the Democrats. They would win the next 2. And he said that as time goes on, that pendulum is going to start swinging faster and more violently. And that's what we saw with Trump getting his first, not getting his second, someone else getting it, and then it's swinging so far back to him in his favor. He actually had better numbers with this re-election than he did in his first election. And that's the most insane aspect.
What I also saw was that a
economics.
lot of people have this sentiment, and it's actually a very true sentiment. A lot of people actually don't care about politics all that much, because over the years, even since we've been alive, voting has actually gone up. Voting is not something that everyone traditionally does, because I'm pretty sure you have people in your life that go, I don't want to vote, it doesn't mean anything. I held that sentiment for a very long time myself. So you factor in how many elections I've been around for that I just didn't vote for, even when I became old enough to do it. Because average people have to understand, voting is just not something that people put a lot of effort into, because, politics can divide people. It's a lot of, it's a lot of anger. It's a lot of passion. It's a lot of name calling. So I understand why average people don't want to deal with it. It makes perfect sense why. But the reason why you should want to look into it is because you yourself can make decisions to make life better for your place you live.
And I've always said that if people don't want to vote on the federal level, because the federal level is where you have the presidents, you have the stuff like that, where
Senate, all that
everything is so dictated by the electoral system. And unless you're voting with the majority of your area, your vote doesn't feel like it matters. But local elections, 100% you need to be involved in, because those are not electoral. Those are all am I getting an extra tax because they're trying to build a road? So you have to vote regardless. But what was interesting about this last election was that you saw so many blue states where people, Trump, he ignited the passions of the Republicans, and he swayed all the independents. And then he actually had, I think it was record Democrats voting Republican for the first time in their lives.
Yeah, and a bunch of Democrats were very much aligned in the aspect of I don't know what this party's become, but I'm not supporting this anymore.
Yeah, and it's such a wild thing, because I remember, I saw a bunch of Republican social media accounts blowing up all these these clips about how backwards some of the things these people are saying now is look at this mixtape that we made of Biden, basically saying all the stuff that he's trying to say Trump is the devil for. And I was like, that's actually pretty funny, because you have this guy's whole career where he's illegal aliens are the devil, this is the devil, and then now finally he's like, why are you being so mean? Why don't you have a heart? I'm like, dude, you ran on this platform for 40 years. He's just saying exactly what you said for 40 years, but because he's not wearing the blue lapel pin, he's the problem. So it's such a unique thing that now you have people on social media that can basically catch you and fact check you and basically say you're all liars because you guys said this on your last election. Here's a clip from the last presidential debate you were a part of, and look at everything he said you said last time, but you didn't do any of it. He actually did. So you saw a lot of people very quickly realizing that, the thing that we always know, politicians are sycophants and they will say what they need to say to get in office. And the one time that we had a non-politician that said what he said and meant what he said, the only other time we ever had that was Ronald Reagan.
And it was crazy is he exposed how bad these people were. They got, because they wanted to put on this, this is a concept in Yu-Gi-Oh! I guess people know what it's called. It's called smoke and mirrors. It's a very cool concept where you present, it's like the Wizard of Oz essentially. He presented himself as this all-knowing, powerful person, but behind the curtains, he was just a regular guy. And and what people don't understand when I bring that up is because a lot of these people were insanely bad people, but the mainstream media would cover up how bad they were because they're getting paid obviously to be the mouthpiece for these people, even though they don't say they are. They obviously are. They get their talking points literally brought to them to say and present the narrative as if it's good or bad. Trump basically pulled the curtain down that, like, no, you're all just frauds. And a lot of people in Hollywood just broke down. It's like, oh my God, this guy just tore apart my facade. It's like, it wasn't gonna. If it wasn't gonna be him, it was gonna be someone else anyway. That's
he
the
said
point.
the thing that we're not supposed to talk about. But what was always interesting to me was, so when Anchorman 2, the movie came out.
Oh man, that's a long forever ago.
Whatever movie that movie came out.
Damn, I was young then.
Anchorman 2 comes out, and the main point of that movie was talking about how news left the realm of public access and started being beholden to shareholders and individual people with agendas. And it was funny because I remember seeing that movie and everyone's like, oh, it wasn't as funny as the first. I'm like, no, I know it wasn't as funny, but it was the first time that you saw someone in Hollywood basically say the news is bought and paid for by some billionaire who's trying to push his agenda.
The whole Trump, when he said things were fake news, he did it recently with CNN. He was like, I don't believe you're a real news network. I'll be like, I thought it was funny as hell. CNN is trash. And keep in mind, Warner Brothers, everyone, tried to launch a CNN streaming service called CNN Plus back in 2021. Failed day one because no one.
And like a week later, they're like, "We're done. Nope, bad idea," and they like immediately shut it down. It was interesting because I remember reading during the last election, the CNN kept touting that, oh, we're the number one news. We have all these things. But nobody talked about the fact that CNN only had their numbers the way they did was because they had exclusive contracts to have their channel running at every public access point, like like malls, airports, gyms, things like that. Like that was the contracted. You have to play CNN here. So the only reason that their numbers were as good as they were is because they were on constant rotation on public spaces. And if they didn't have that, no one was there.
Because I'm pretty sure you saw the stats too. Remember, the people that watch the news still are people that like your dad and your mom, that age. Yeah. Our demographic does not. Our demographic is actually don't give a shit on news.
We don't give a shit anymore because we can see it faster and probably more accurate on the internet. And if it's wrong, the community notes will clear it up for us.
Yeah.
So it's one of those.
And I imagine your dad doesn't like. Did your dad even watch the news anymore? Your mom to watch the news? It's like, I'm pretty sure they don't. They probably just keep it on as something just to look at when they come home.
They don't even do that. They just, I think my dad canceled cable because he's like, it's full of shit. I'm done. And he just watches DVDs all day.
Oh God, what an old man! Those DVDs, man. I put a DVD forever.
Blu-rays, 4K, like that. Like, but
good Lord,
it's all physical media because he thinks.
I bet your mom hates The View because The View is so trash.
Which is funny is, so I work at a hospital, and one of the doctors I work with, he says that The View is basically just a bunch of women just bitching at each other, like you would see at like any one of those nail salons. It's like basically like an open mic for all the women who don't know what they're talking about to gossip. And every time we walk into like clinics and it's like all female staff, he's like, it's like The View in here. It's like all they do is just they just echo each other and just bitch at everything when they have no idea what's going on. So it's always
a bunch of people that I don't know if they just simply believe whatever they're told. And then they're and like, I don't know at any point can they be considered unbiased now because everyone knows just how wrong they are.
Ridiculous it is.
And how ridiculous it is. And they keep talking about Fox News. Like, guys, Fox News isn't in a good spot either. People don't like them either.
Everyone knows that Fox News is also bought and owned by, I think it was like Robert Murdoch, another like huge
liberal guy. Yeah, all the kids are liberal too. Yeah,
and he made Fox News as a liberal-owned news station to appeal to another demographic, which is why you have all these smarter people of Fox News that quit and left and started their own thing because they're like, no, I know what's happening, I'm out. So you had all these people, like the ones who actually drew in the numbers, all say to hell with this place because of that exact reason. So it's such a wild thing to like look at with just the whole nature of politics and all of this stuff. It's like the more you look into it, the more you realize that it's quite literally what George Orwell said 1984 was going to be. And these people, the controlling power are using their money to basically coerce the masses to think a certain way so they can get away with murder. And it's like, it's such a wild thing where you're just like, oh, this is good on George Orwell. He called this shit decades ago.
I don't know if you watch people like Charlie Cook or Officer Tatum, people like that, where they go on the college campuses and talk to the kids.
I legitimately, so I I'm kind of like, so I'm a libertarian. I've said this a few times where I vote. If I could affiliate with myself with any side, I would be like a firm purple, like I'm right down the middle. I'm too liberal for my conservative friends. I'm too conservative for my liberal friends, but it's like whatever. Um, but every once in a while I'll see a clip of Charlie Kirk and his stuff, and I'm just fascinated by it because he'll go on and he'll just be like, "Tell me why you feel this way," and they're like, "Blah blah blah." He's like, "That's not a fact. That's a feeling. That's not a fact. That's a feeling. This is the actual fact." And he like, maybe this guy's like autistic or something, but his like brain just has every fact known to man, and he just throws all this like pure, unfiltered, like, here is the actual truth of what you're trying to say, and this is why you're wrong. And they're always like, "Oh yeah, I don't okay, bye," and they leave. And I watch it. I'm like, this is the wildest thing to see. It's actually fascinating to watch. I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but I do think it's pretty wild how he does it and how
the craziest thing is about. It's not even just Charlie for me or Officer Tatum. It's the fact that the people got to understand the kids these days. I don't know who's raising them, but they are being raised by wolves, bears, or lions because the way they talk in those. I'm like, I don't know who raised you. I don't know what life you've had, and I get it. We all have some struggles, but goddamn, do you sound like an actual moron? I didn't sound that stupid when I was that young. There's no way we did. Because they say the most unbelievable racist, like, people use that words like buzzword, like racist or whatever. If somebody's going to say the most racist things possible, they don't even notice it because they're just like propped up to say these things as if like they're supposed to be some saviors. And it's like, no, what are you talking about? Some of them are actually pro-segregation. What the world is wrong with them?
So it's funny. So I remember reading about something where basically it's like your brain creates an echo chamber. And that's what we thrive for. And the idea that if you believe everyone is racist, your brain will highlight every instance where you think something is racist. And someone's like, no, that's not true. The world is just racist. I'm like, okay, well, example, don't think about elephants. Now you're thinking about it. So because of that, whenever you're basically saying, okay, here's a picture, right? Here's 25 colors on this picture. I want you to focus on everything red. And so everyone will see all the red things, but they will ignore all the blue and the green and the purples because they will focus on the one thing. And that's kind of how life is. If you tell someone the entire world is racist, all you see is the red in the picture around you. But you don't see all of the other examples of like maybe there's 25 other colors and only 1% of the picture was red, but all you see is the red. So you think the whole picture is red. So because of that, our brains deceive us, and they kind of tell us what we want to think because it's a way for our brains to find comfort in the normalcy that we want. And because of that, it always bites us in the ass because facts don't give a fuck about people's feelings. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. It was the thing with Morgan Freeman had that one quote where it was like the whole racism thing. It's like, if you don't want to give people who are racist like any credit, don't start talking about race or whatever. It was a line that he mentioned one time, and that's the thing I was talking to a friend about. It's like every instance that someone has that they consider racist is probably not even racist. It's probably either prejudice or because there's many things to go into a situation that doesn't even have to involve with race. Is everyone like will default to race without actually talking about the situation? So like, let's say I go outside and I go to a bus stop and I sit down and I bump a guy and he's like smoking a cigarette and he drops a cigarette. And I get mad at that guy for getting mad at me. It's like, you're racist to me. It's like, no, you bumped the guy with the cigarette.
Right.
That's nothing to do with race at all. He just probably didn't like you as a person.
What's funny is that most people misconstrued what racism is, and they basically think that bigotry is racism. And they're not quite the same thing. So it's always funny to see that people are like, oh, this is racist. This is racist. I'm like, no, that's just a bigoted asshole. But he's not racist because that's not how, by definition, what racism actually means. He's just a dick. Like, that's not racism. That's just, this guy's a twat.
Yeah, and
like, there's nothing else.
Not all prejudice is racial bias either. Some people, and that's crazy. The people that are always talking about racism are literally the most racist people possible.
Really
You'll ask them, "Do you like white people?" They'll be like, "I hate white people." That's racist, right? They're like, "No, it's okay."
It's only racist if the whites do it. I'm like, that's really racist.
Racism.
Yeah.
The lack of self-awareness on these people is insane. It's actually just on another level.
One of the classes I took when I was doing my degree, we had it was an American diversity class, and the whole
Oh
class,
no.
I went into the class and I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. Let's see what this is. And you had like half the class were like very like white's the devil, and the other half was like, no, stop. And then the teacher was like, let's talk about inclusion. And then everyone started ranting about it, and he's like, actual inclusion means that you have to let everyone in the room have a equal voice, and if you're not being inclusive. And then half the class was like, oh no, he's right, we're the bad guys. And it was like, it was such a wild class to take, because this guy was he was very much a liberal, very much like, let's change the world by doing social justices. But
good Lord,
he was actually self-aware and very smart about it, and was very pragmatic when how he did everything. And I'm like, I like you a lot as a teacher.
I can get along with someone like that.
You're awesome. And I was like, this is great. This other this 17-year-old kid who was like trying to like do early access college credits, who basically said everyone who's white is racist. She's the problem. You're fantastic. So I was just watching. It was such a great class, because it was really,
you know, the crazy thing that a lot of people don't even understand, like just how demographics work in life. So people will ask, like, well, why is there no black people in X thing? Well, if you tell people certain things, their minds just don't register it. Like, you'll have a basic conversation with someone, and you'll basically say to someone, hey, black people make up like what, 30% of the population. So just by that sheer number alone, you're not going to see them as represented in certain things, just based on the fact that there's just literally less black people than white people. Like, because someone brought up the whole Senate argument, because there's Tim Scott, and then there's that one other guy that's married to the white lady. They're like, well, why don't we see more black people in the Senate? Well, probably because most of them are in jail. Sorry, guys, I had to do the joke there. But a lot of them probably just don't have aspirations of wanting to be in the Senate. It's just how it works. There's certain demographics that want to do different things other than other demographics. That's just how life is. But it's not.
That was actually something we talked about in great detail in this class, where he was like, why don't you see more minorities in politics? And the argument that I put was that most minorities don't believe in politics, so they're not going to be the one that decides, I want to change the system, because they already think the system is broken. So with that mentality, you don't see a lot of minorities jump into politics. And then when they do jump into politics,
they're always liberal,
so goddamn extreme that they
stir away. They're just progressive. They're just
they're so extreme in their views that the average voter who's not affiliated was like, no, I don't want that, because that sounds crazy. That sounds just as crazy as that guy in the red who's talking about kicking everyone out. You're saying the opposite and the equal crazy. I'm not going to vote for either of you. So because of that, what really needs to happen is more minorities need to start like trusting politics, and maybe being like more moderate and less extreme, because the extreme ones are the ones that
based on that thing
don't get voted.
They believe there's systemic racism. Now, I'm not saying that that systemic racism wasn't a thing like probably in the 1950s, 1940s, but in the day and age we live in, you ask someone, what can a black person do that a white person can, or vice versa? It's like, literally, the only thing that stops you from getting to what you want in life is yourself, essentially.
Apparently, get college paid for free based on their skin color. That's what they can do that white people can't.
Oh, no.
I didn't get a goddamn thing paid for my schooling until I was married, and they're like, oh, you're poor. Here's some money. But because I was white, I didn't qualify for anything.
Wouldn't that just be minority privilege at that point? That's just minority privilege,
It's like kind of a reverse racism, where it's like, okay, now just the whites, the bad guys, so we're not going to give them any money. And I'm like, okay, that's fun, guys. I want the Pell Grant too. Let me have it.
And talk about teaching kids to have no self-responsibility or accountability. Hey, all this debt that you have, I'll just forgive it. How does that teach them how to be responsible in life?
Well, that's why they were eventually like, no, it's illegal. No, you're not doing that. We're not. The golden ball and chain that you guys promised to get people to vote you in, we're not letting you do that. So you're not getting it.
Before we go to comics, I want to talk to you about that. I'll actually think about, because you went to college and university. You know, everyone now is talking about college a scam, but you went to school because you were a nurse, and obviously that's in high demand. Do you think the overall idea of college is a scam unless you're going for something like what you're going for?
100%. Unless you're going to college for an actual degree that requires it, don't fucking waste your time or money. You can get more money out of a trade than you can out of college. And like, if you're going to college for like a liberal arts degree or an art critic degree, unless you're planning to become a teacher, you're not going to use your degree. So I tell people, like, I told my son, because he's 16 and he's like already scouting out colleges, and I'm like, before we do any of this, I want you to decide right now what you want to do. And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, then don't go yet. Like, when you know what you want, if that requires a degree, then go. If you can do it from a trade, then do that. If you like, but unless you have an actual reason to go there, do not waste your time or money, because that's things that you could do to better yourself in another capacity. And so that's kind of what we're doing. So he keeps all these letters. Okay, cool. Let's table it until we decide, do you want to do this? Nope. Okay, let's disregard this plan. And I think he's talking about going for like mechanical engineering, which is actually something you do need a degree for. So so that's like, okay, yeah, we'll do that. But
and that probably only needs like what, 2 years anyway, max, maybe.
It's you have to have your AA, but then it's like an 18-month program. So it's kind of like a 3.5 year.
Okay.
So it's not quite a bachelor's, but it's like in the middle.
Because I was so glad people started having those conversations. Because even just after leaving high school, I was like, why did I waste my time in public school my entire life? I just found it boring. I hated school in general. And most people feel that same way too. It's like, if you already found what you did in high school boring in 4 years when it's just free, imagine having to pay off like $30,000 of debt for classes that you didn't even need to take in college as well.
Yeah. The concept of prerequisites to me is the biggest scam. And I absolutely hate it, because you're being forced to take classes that have no beneficial value to you. They're just to fill a quota so that you can say you were well-rounded. But all it is the college is padding their pockets saying, we forced this guy to take a philosophy class, even though he's never going to need it. So I think to a degree, yes, colleges are a scam unless you're actually going there for something that you need to be there for.
So it's like half a scam.
Yeah. But most people don't go there for the things that they need. So
most people are going there with the same mindset your son has, where it's like they don't really know what they want to do, and by the time they want it, you figure out it's like, but you already wasted so much time and money. It's like you're already massively in debt, but they don't see it that way until they have to pay it off themselves. Because I think kids that young don't understand, unless they're paying the bills, they don't actually feel the brunt of it, because everything's paid for at that point.
Exactly.
You know. Yeah,
I always felt that most kids don't become adults till they hit 25 and they realize they're not invincible, and life is expensive. And like, you start having these realizations right around 25, and I feel like that's probably where the voting age should be, anyways. If Hertz won't let you rent a car until 25, why are we giving you the ability to change laws? So
yeah, keep in mind. The other thing with like your dad's generation, your mom's one, is they were told by their parents, yeah, you have to go to school, graduate high school, go to college, graduate this, then do all this plan. It's like, but life's massively changed since then.
It has.
But they don't see it that way, because, they came from a generation where that was the requirement to be successful, where you're considered a good person, or a person that, I don't know, it's like knowledgeable, because you went through all the phases. And it's like, do you have to do this to be considered a decent person? Like, if I didn't graduate college, does that make me less of a person? Like, does that make me a less good guy? It's like, what the hell?
Apparently, yes. Apparently, everyone's parents. Yeah. But it's just such a wild thing. Every time it gets brought up, I'm just like, I don't understand how, like, we're all still drinking this Kool-Aid and we know it's all full of shit.
Some of them are pro-segregation. Some of them back in the day, they had black-owned schools, but that was always obviously for that time period. But now there are people that are like, yeah, should we have like black-owned schools? It's like, that's not, I don't know how you're going to get that passed. That sounds pretty bad. But I wanted to ask you this, because I didn't get a chance to ask you this on the last show. How did you ever get into comics, though?
What was that?
How did you ever get into comics?
So, I mean, as a kid, I grew up in the 90s, and in the 90s, it was kind of always considered the golden era of superheroes, where you had like every Marvel hero had its own cartoon. You had Iron Man's cartoons, you had Hulk, you had Fantastic Four, you had the Spider-Man cartoon. DC had all of their cartoons going. And it just kind of was like, it was part of the popular zeitgeist at the time. So I was like, I always just kind of loved comics. And it just kind of ran with me. So comics were always just a fun escape, but in the 90s, it was a very different thing, because we didn't have social media. We didn't have that instant access like streaming or anything. It was always Saturday morning, here's where all your shows are. After school at 4:00, here's where all these shows are. Like, and it was part of like the scheduled aspect of your life. Like, you'd go to school, you'd come home, you do your homework as fast as you can, do your chores as fast as you can, because the Toonami block is about to start. Let's do this.
I remember that.
that was just how it was. So because I wasn't one to jump into sports, it was always like if you're not in sports, you're into the nerd side of things. And that was just kind of how the 90s kind of was. So
Did you have a comic shop around you?
I had a few actually, and I used to get on pretty well with the comic book the owners, and they always had like they were way nerdier than I was, and they would always like blow my mind with things that they would say. But it was like in the 90s, like the 80s and 90s, being a nerd was like it was like a trial of passage for it. Like you had to like either deal with the fact that people were going to look down on you and you had to like fight for it, or you just never talked about it. Like you were just a closeted nerd. But nowadays, because of like the Marvel and the MCU, it's like everyone's like, oh, it's cool to be a nerd. It was like that joke in 21 Jump Street when Jonah Hill was like, I should have just been born 10 years later, because liking comics is popular. Like caring about the environment is popular. If I was in this time, I would be a god. Like just his whole like idea that that's just how it was.
The only socially acceptable show to talk about if you were a nerd was like Dragon Ball Z.
And it was because like everyone liked it, but like
it was like the only one that was like, okay, if you this one's cool to talk about. It was oh man, but if you talk about Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Sailor Moon, man,
no, you were allowed to talk about all of those things when they were popular. But if you liked them after the first wave of it, then you were like, oh, God, you haven't let that go yet. Okay, sorry, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, you still watching that? It's like, yeah, I never got this too, because Power Rangers has this bad too. People always ask, like, you watch Power Rangers after the original? Yeah, I liked it. I just kind of stuck with it. I don't just give up on things because they're not popular anymore, you know?
Like, yeah, I mean, they're like, what happened? I'm like, well, some crazy stuff happened. So it's like, they went to space. Like, what? Yeah.
They started traveling in time. Yeah, it's the thing that they do now.
It got crazy, but no, it was pretty funny. It was just like such a wild thing for how like the culture of fads was a thing that was so prevalent in the 90s. And for people who found their thing, the fads never really went away and just be kind of carried with it. But like I saw all the popular kids very much doing the fad thing where it was like, this week we're gonna like yo-yos. Next week we're gonna we're gonna like this. Next week we're gonna do this. And I was like, I still like the last thing, guys. I'm gonna stick with it because it's pretty cool. And it was very much like it was always like that. So, but those are always the ones that like the jocks were always the ones that like jumped to the fads because it was popular. But it was funny because like there was even that phase in the 90s where like the MTV stuff got really popular and like the Road Rules and all that stuff got really popular. And I was like, I don't like this, guys. They're kind of terrible human beings. I'm not gonna watch this. And I just wouldn't do it. I
thought all of MTV was basically cringe, except for like MTV Cribs. I watched every once in a while. I thought that was just that looked so fake though.
But I liked Cribs. Cribs was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah.
But also I loved like Pimp My Ride and stuff like that. That was just
God, yeah, I remember that one.
Exhibit come on and be like, we're gonna put a TV.
I even watched Jersey Shore. I watched Jersey Shore, man. I loved it. I knew it was trash, but I loved it so much, man.
I couldn't do that. Jersey Shore was like roadkill. It was like I knew that if I watched it, I would get stuck staring at it. But I was like, no. Everything about these people are like, this is
you remember Teen Mom?
Yeah, my wife really likes it. She still watches that shit.
She still watches it. No way.
Because she's like, she's like, I grew up watching this, and I'm just gonna look at all these people. I'm like, look, they made careers at being skanks. I'm
all of it is the same though. Like none of the girls, if you type up some of those girls that were like the first initial ones, none of them. One of them, it's like a porn star. It's like the only thing that she's known for.
Gross.
The other girl, yeah.
But one of them apparently has like an HGTV house flipping show now, and I was like, okay. She kind of made it.
Yeah, most of them never made it. Like, and the journey was the same. It's like, oh, I accidentally got knocked up by this guy. I hope he sticks around. And now I finally have the kid. And it's like, oh, okay. It's all the same. It's like they're just glorifying being a whore. It's like, no, it's not a good thing.
It was such a funny thing because like every episode, the show would start saying, we don't condone teenage pregnancy. And then it was like, now on this week for the teenage pregnancy. I'm like, okay, guys, I see what you're doing. You put the disclaimer saying that you don't believe in it, but you're clearly cashing in on it. And every year you're looking for new teens who got knocked up, even though you said we're not looking for teens who got knocked up. Like, you guys are such hypocrites. So I can't with a lot of MTV.
Which comics were you mostly into? Still now, you're still mostly into like DC stuff, right? For the most part.
Funny enough, so when I was a kid, I was hugely into Spider-Man, hugely into Marvel. I loved the Marvel stuff. Spider-Man and X-Men were my go-tos for everything. And what really got me back into DC was actually Hush. I think it was like 2005 or 2006 when the first run of Hush came out.
Yeah, Batman
and I
issue
remember
608. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember seeing one of the issues on the shelf, and I was like, "That's pretty damn cool looking." And I bought it, and I'm like, "Oh, this is like part 4." And I had to I sought out all the other parts before it, and then I just I fell in love with it. I'm like, "Is this what Batman comics are like now?" And I just went right back into this rabbit hole of like, "Holy shit, Batman comics are way darker than I thought they were nowadays." And I just got stuck onto DC ever since. Like Hush is what brought me back to the realm of DC.
So now, after that, did you ever read the sequel, Heart of Hush? It was written by Paul Dini.
Yeah, I have all of that. So I actually in my boxes, my mini boxes of comics on this side of the wall here, you can see them.
Oh my god, those are a lot of them.
My mini boxes of comics, I have a handful of the original Hush issues, and then I have the entire maybe 2 years of Batman and DC comics after that point. Well, I have the Heart of Hush stuff. I have the Scarecrow Scare Beast stuff. I have the entire arc of the War Crimes crossover where Stephanie Jones was trying to basically initiate the project the Batman's contingent plan, and she's where you basically get all the mob guys in one big room, and then they basically kill each other, and she's like, I'm going to initiate this thing, let's do this. And then she's like, the plan didn't happen because I was missing a mob guy named Matches Malone. And Batman's like, that was me, you idiot. Of course it didn't work. I didn't know you were doing this. And the whole comic, I'm like, damn, Batman's crazy. And I was like, it was such a cool run. And I think it ended with Stephanie dying because she that beat up by Black Mask. And then they eventually retconned her and brought her back to life. But I remember it was right around the time where she became the Robin for that 6-month stint where Tim Drake was I'm done being Robin, so he's like, I'm going to get your girlfriend to be Robin now. And then
talk about characters that age complete crap with Tim Drake. I know Chuck Dixon did a great job with him, even though he didn't create him, but the other guy, I forgot the creator's name, but Chuck Dixon wrote most of those impactful stories that people know about Tim Drake. To see what they've done with Tim Drake, it's just, God, that's so disgusting.
Yeah, they've definitely ruined a lot of the modern comics. And it's funny because you see all these people that talk about how why comics are failing and all that stuff, and it's because a lot of these publishers kind of fell into the what if we just listen to the internet and maybe the internet would tell us what they want to buy. And these people who were complaining about these things and were like, oh yay, look, they did this, and they're praising it. None of them are still buying the comics. They're just praising it and then moving on. So the numbers actually even further.
I'll even add to your point. They were never comic fans to begin with. I'm going to be honest here. I think most of these people were only fans of just the television shows or the movies, because even the studios knew this. If they made television shows and movies, they could get more people into this stuff because comics have a peak. They obviously have a point where they'll just cap out. A lot of these people, when they're talking about movies and comic book heroes, they're only talking about television and movies. I firmly believe that at this point, given how many idiots out there are talking about the Silver Surfer cast. I'm like, oh, Silver Surfer, woman's in the comic books. The fact that you had to even look her up, I knew you didn't know she existed. None of us knew she existed.
No, I knew she existed. It was a stupid character, though.
Yeah. They made
There's a reason why they went back to Norrin and Rad every single time, because every time they introduced it, another variation, the comic fans are like, no. And then they're like, okay, cool, we're not doing that again. And then Marvel, for some reason, thinks that they're invincible, even after the massive failures they've had the last 5 movies in a row. They're still trying to do what they've already proven they can't do.
So stupid, man. I hate these people. And the fans just, why do they listen to these people? They don't buy books. One, because average people will still parrot lines well, there's nothing good in the mainstream. And you'll ask them, what stuff have you read that made you stop reading? They can't even answer a single. I'm like, so you don't know what turned you off from reading comics, but you say everything is trash. And I have to puzzle in my brain to put it together. This person never was reading books then. You know this as well as I do. No one can read everything that comes out on Wednesday. You can't. There's too many books. Also, no one even has the money for that. I don't have the money to buy every single book. It's ridiculous.
That's what actually initially turned me off from reading comics. It was not because I didn't like the books anymore. It's because my pull list started getting so expensive that I just couldn't afford it.
I
So
know
I'm
you
like,
feel
I'll
it.
just
Yeah.
stop for a bit and I'll just start buying the trades. And I
Mhm.
would wait
Even
6 months
that
and
gets
just buy the
expensive too.
trades. Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is.
Mhm.
So that was how I actually, for a long while before I was like, let's get my pull list going again.
Mhm.
I would buy just the trades every 6 months, and
Mhm.
I felt like I was always really out of the loop. But like some of the best books on the market right now are kind of like reinventions of these characters that are just done very well.
We're talking about the
Like
Absolute line from DC.
the Absolute line is fantastic, so good. Um, I loved how everyone was like, "This Batman design is stupid," and the first issue came out, and they're like, "Oh, he's awesome!" And they immediately were like, "I see what they're doing." And then Ultimate Spider-Man is one of my favorite books right now. It's
I read
so
issue
good.
one. I have the trade. Issue one was really good. It was.
So good.
Mhm.
Um, it's such a weird riff on the character, but it's like, what if we made Peter Parker like a full-on adult with family and then give him his powers? I'm like, okay, let's see how this goes.
Well, so I'll ask you, since you read the Absolute line so far. So for me, I'm gonna go with All In, the All In special number one. Then I'm gonna go into reading the books. So I have my own
Yeah,
comic channel where I review them anyway. Which one do you like the most so far? Batman, Superman, or Wonder Woman for the Absolute stuff?
it's so hard because I'm really loving the Batman stuff. I don't really like the dump truck Batmobile. I think that's just crazy. Um, but they're each of them have these really cool things. Like I love out of all three of them, Wonder Woman has the best design. Like that design that they gave her for the absolute Wonder Woman,
Looks good.
so damn cool. The sleeve tattoos, the whole like
Mhm.
the giant buster sword of a weapon. Like I'm just
Mhm.
like, this is the coolest Wonder Woman I've ever seen. Um, Superman's story is crazy.
Mhm.
Um, the fact that his suit is basically Brainiac AI, and it's like we're charging it, and it's also made from like the ashes of like your people. Like, and I'm like, okay, first off, this is wild. Second off, I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, cool. And then Batman is just, what if Batman's parents never died and he never had that thing, but somehow he still became a crazy vigilante, but
Mhm.
his symbol is an axe and he has like talons in his cape and he's just built
Yeah, and he's
like
not rich. Yeah,
he's
that's
not
their
rich, but
that's
he's
their
like,
thing now. They don't want Bruce to be rich, and it's like, well, how do you think he owns all this stuff? You
yeah.
can't be broke buying this stuff.
But that's the funny thing. That's what's so cool about the absolute one is like he's not rich, but this is how he does it. He basically steals shit. And I'm like, oh, so cool. So, but I loved the whole idea that like Darkseid was like, I'm going to take away what made these people heroes and see what happens. And they still became the same heroes. They're just
Mhm.
without their moral center. So it's like, okay, you made them worse. That's what you did. They're now
Oh
going to actually
gosh.
kill you. They're not going to spare you. They're going to murder you. Okay, good job, Darkseid.
So I know you have the Culture Nerd website, and one of the people that you hired to do the articles, he put out the best Batman comics. He actually put out the best one. So I don't know if you read over his list. Let's see if you agree with some of these. The first one, I don't think he has it in order. So just the first one, The Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale.
That's one of my favorites. I 100% agree. That's one of the best ones.
The Dark
But
Knight Returns.
you also have to, if you're going to read the Long Halloween, you have to
Yes.
immediately follow it with Dark Victory,
Dark Victory. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Dark Victory is one of the best origins for Dick Grayson that they've ever had,
Mhm.
and just the whole riff on like he's like, I'm gonna be like Robin Hood, and Batman's like, hoods are dangerous, and like knocks it like, I'm like, he's like, fine, just Robin without the hood, and I'm like, okay, that's pretty clever. like
I would also
like
tell people, I know they put out animated movies for the Long Halloween, but no, read the book. Let's just
No,
just
so the animated movie is probably one of the only times that the animated adaptations actually nailed it.
mhm.
I will say that it's really good. It's missing some cool things,
Mhm.
but it's still really good.
Let's go with the next one. The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. You agree with
Yep.
that one?
Uh,
Yeah.
Batman as a
Classic.
fascist. Hell yeah, let's do it.
Batman the Killing Joke.
Yep, that's a good one.
Great. That's a classic. I love that one. I love the story.
The animated movie was a travesty, but the actual book
Yeah,
itself
we
is
don't
amazing.
talk about that. Yeah, that
Don't
was
talk about
just a steaming pile of shit.
Nope. It's
The fact
almost
that
just
they
as
made
bad
that
as the
is
Hush movie.
crazy.
Yep,
That's
the
the
Hush
next
movie's
one.
trash.
Batman Hush by Jim Lee. Obviously, you love that one. As you know me, I love Batman. It's one of my favorite Batman stories of all time. Absolutely, what a classic story. Love it. Love
What
it.
was so good about it was how impactful it was and how it changed the landscape of the Batman mythos going forward. you basically solidified that Riddler was a menace, like someone that
Mhm.
actually had a real stake in the game. He wasn't like Frank Gorshin. He wasn't some like Jim Carrey-esque, woo, I'm a
No,
Riddler.
no,
Like this was
don't even.
actually the first time that you ever saw the Riddler
Yeah,
truly menacing.
he was like, yeah, yeah.
And it wasn't until the last page when you're like, oh shit, when you realize that he was the puppeteer behind the whole thing. And you're like, oh, and then I loved Batman. Sorry, my computer was doing something.
That's fine.
I loved Batman's like, I know that you know who I am. And I know that you're not going to tell a soul because knowledge is power.
Mhm.
And now you have the most power and you're never going to share it with anyone. And he's like, damn it, you're right. Like it was one of the best ways to stop him. It was like, to me, it was almost on par with Red Sun Superman, where Lex Luthor defeated evil Russian Superman by saying, why don't you just put Metropolis in a bottle? And he's like, oh no, I'm the bad guy. And then he immediately like shut down. It was one of those like cerebral moments that I'm like, this is just such good, damn good writing. I love this so much.
What's another cool thing about Hush as the villain that people don't realize is that he has a different backstory in the way it's like he actually he's basically Bruce if he doesn't have the parents that he gets that loves him. You know, because Thomas's parents, he didn't like his parents.
Slightly more sociopath, it would be Hush. Yeah. But I always compared, like, when someone asked me like, what's Hush like? And I'm like, do you watch the James Bond movies? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, did you see like Spectre and all those movies? He's like, yeah. I was like, Blofeld. That's Hush. Grew up with the hero, had a bad versions in his life, wanted to kill his dad, and then blamed you for everything that he did. That's Hush.
Good Lord. And then you read the sequel where it's like he killed his damn mother because she basically took all his money. Oh Lord, man. Yeah. Character's got a fucked up past. All right.
And then he decides he's gonna like jigsaw his face and then basically become Bruce Wayne for a bit. I'm like, oh my god, this character is so insane. I love it.
I've not read this one, but I've heard good things about it. I actually bought it. I own it. Batman Arkham Asylum by Grant Morrison.
Arkham Asylum by Grant Morrison is one of those. Let me see if I can pull it up. That's the A Serious House on a Serious Earth.
Yes.
That is one of those books that's just so damn wild. And it was one of the first times that I actually had ever seen Grant Morrison's name on anything. And this was like one of his first forays in the comics. The longest time I couldn't really follow the book because the art was so abstract and so wild that it was almost distracting from the story.
Oh yeah.
It's one of those books where if you can sit down and you can read the whole thing and you can get through how much of an acid trip it is, it's so damn good. And it's basically kind of like, it was kind of loosely adapted in the Arkham Asylum games. Like the nuts take over the nut house and Batman shows up to try to put them all back in their cells. And it's just a wild journey. It's one of those classics where when I first read it, I'm like, okay, this guy's going to be huge into Batman. And I didn't realize that he stayed away from Batman for so long. And then when he came back into it, he redefined Batman again.
Next one, Batman Nightfall by Chuck Dixon.
Ooh, that's a deep cut. Nightfall was such a cool book because Nightfall had Bane show the world that Batman is human, break his back, and then this was part of that weird era of DC Comics where they tried to like kind of reinvent the character a little bit to kind of like catch audiences, and they gave us John Paul Valley, aka Azrael, to be the new, more violent cyborg Batman, basically. And eventually, audiences were like, "Oh, we want Bruce back because this guy's scary," and they eventually were like, "Bruce, his back is healed, and he has to beat the shit out of his replacement."
You know, everyone talks about the backbreaking. That part that's after it, the next panel where Bane goes broken and done. Just
such a ballsy, man. Like that's
and
what
I loved in that story, man, was that Bane strategically destroyed Batman. It wasn't he just walked up and beat his ass. He let out all the villains, got him weak enough, found his secret identity, went to the mansion, and Bruce was like, "What the fuck? It's never happened before." I love villains like that. Man, Bane's always been one of my favorite, man. I love Bane.
What was always so cool about Bane was that he is a masterful tactician. He is a genius, but his reliance and usage of the venom is what hinders him. And the more he uses it, the stupider he gets. So he eventually, in his battles with Batman had to rely on the Venom more and more, and then became less and less of who he should have been because of it. And it's such a wild dynamic for that character.
And you already talked about Batman Dark Victory, which is on your guys' list. The next one is Batman Court of Owls by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. Love that story. That's
Such a great story. I think to me, the only part of that story where it kind of jumped the shark a little bit was Batman versus Talon fighting in the air around the airplane. That whole sequence where he's like fighting on like a 747. I'm like, I accepted the zombie ninjas, but I don't know if I can accept this. And that was the only part that really put me off. I was like, this isn't working for me, guys. Like, this is so weird. Like, they're fighting on the side of a plane while it's midair. Like, what is happening? They could have like done away with that part, and I would have been more satisfied. But I loved the whole idea that Gotham is so corrupt that it's been corrupt forever because of the secret society that runs it.
Yeah.
And then you had this whole thing that Bruce had an older brother that they had taken. Or did he have an older brother that they took? Like, there's so many things where you're like, was that real or not? I don't know. And then all the tie-in stuff where like Nightwing was being courted to be one of them, or Dick Grayson. And before his parents got killed, they were going to try to take him. And then his parents got killed and Batman got him first. So many cool aspects of that whole. Another one of those comics that had ripple effects for the Batman mythos going
now
forward.
Everyone expects the Court of Owls to come out at some point in a Batman new film series or franchise. Like, when we get the Court of Owls, they're like, oh shit.
It honestly would make more sense for it to be like front and center in the Matt Reeves verse, because
yeah.
He already set up the movie where like the owls are like the obvious, like, this is why this whole city's fucked up, is like clearly. Like, it's not even a hard sell. Just be like, Court of Owls. You're like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Gotham by Gaslight by Brian Augustin.
One of my favorite Elseworld stories, because it's like, what if Joker was Jack the Ripper and Batman was like in that time frame trying to stop him? Like, such a wild story.
Did you like the animated movie of that one?
It was all right. I thought
it was
making they made some choices. Like,
they
made some choices. It, like, I always felt like the biggest problem with the animated movies for DC was that they should have been more adventurous with the art styles and not had the same art style for every movie.
My problem with them was that they think that people already read the comics, so they just wanted to do a twist for people that didn't read the comics, and it's like, no, I don't need a twist. I want you just to show me what was in the book, just in a different version of that's the events.
You mean exactly like what they did with Hush, where they're like, let's.
You saw the interview afterwards. They were like, well, people already read the story, so they knew who Hush was. It's like, what? Yeah. Oh god, that's how you knew the movies were downhill after that. Like, that's basically like what they did in Arkham Origins with the Black Mask, like when Joker was revealed to be Black Mask. The only reason why that was plausible is because you could think, you're like, okay, Joker probably would do something like that. It's not out of him to do that.
It was actually within character for Joker to beat the shit out of Ramon Sionis, and put him in a closet and then pretend to be him for a while. That made total sense. So when that twist happened, I'm like, that's pretty clever. Like, Joker just...
I know nowadays no one likes it, but I thought it was pretty clever. Like, Joker being more than just I'm a crazy wacko, and he's actually a tactician. That's a fun Joker.
If you actually look behind me, I have my Arkham Origins Collector's Edition Joker with the knife on the table and all the TVs behind him. Like, that I
why is that game never getting a remaster, man?
It needs one. I love that game, and it has one of the best quoted moments of the entire Arkham franchise.
When Bruce is talking to Alfred, and
he says, the reason why people are safe at night is because they're afraid of me. I was like, that is one of the best Batman moments I've ever heard. And it's in the game that's most overlooked by fans.
The part where Alfred's like, you're not some hardened vigilante. You're just a kid with a trust fund and too much anger. And it's like, they're being so honest with each other, but it's so truthful. But Alfred just doesn't want to let his son go to go out there and get killed. Like, what's crazy about Arkham Origins, man, is it's so good as far as like the story element is concerned, but it's the gameplay that threw people off. The gameplay itself, the gameplay narrative, it's what brings it down. You know, they had some things in Arkham Origins that never happened in the Rocksteady games. Like in the Cold Heart DLC, you got a chance to go around the Wayne Mansion. Never had that in the Rocksteady games.
That was one of the best Batman DLCs out of the entire franchise. It was so good. I really hope that WB Games looks at that game and says, it's time. Let's clean it up. And
Yeah.
let's change some things because we've had hindsight for about 15 years and we can make this a AAA amazing 10 out of 10 game. It has all the pieces. We just got to tweak a few things. And honestly, in the entire Arkham franchise, the Arkham Origins suit for Batman is probably my favorite suit. Like,
Yeah. Looks good.
just the design of it, where like it was so, to me, it was so interesting that when Batman Arkham Asylum came out, you had this almost hyper like adherence to the comics. So all the villains looked like the comic book villains. Like you had all this like nothing was overly realistic. Like Poison Ivy was still in like the giant plant monsters and everything. And then Arkham Origins swung in such an opposite direction where like this is the comics, but this is as realistic as we can push them. So Waylon Jones is not this monstrous crocodile man yet. He's just a giant dude who has scaly skin. So like Bane is a dude in like a leather jacket with the Venom stuff, and is like they took and tried to make it as realistic as humanly possible. And then if you actually look at from Arkham Origins to Arkham City to Arkham Knight, Arkham Origins came out and had them essentially course correct the next two games to make it more realistic, which was such a wild thing that a game not even made by the same studio caused them to make it a little bit more realistic away from what they had in Asylum. So it was such a cool thing that they did that.
What's also crazy
Troy
is
Baker as
that
Joker was amazing.
Oh no, I was gonna say what's also interesting about that series is you would think if another studio does it, they're not gonna care about it the same way. But if people go back and actually watch the behind the scenes videos of them make, you could tell the passion was there. They really wanted to make a good game. It's just some stuff they fell apart on. It was mostly just based off like actual gameplay issues that had nothing to do with the story. The story was completely fine. It actually had great moments in there too. The best depiction of Bane ever, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Bane was great.
That final battle between Bane and Batman
Yeah.
in the manor was a really hard fight. And I enjoyed the fist fight between Batman and Joker at the end. I thought that was just to me, it was like the Metal Gear Solid way of ending the game.
Oh, the part where they're
doing
each other
with our hands.
The part where Firefly and Bane, and they don't know if that's Joker behind the black mask, when he was looking at them having that business meeting and he kicked Electrocutioner out of the room and killed him. Yeah. Oh god, man, just seeing Joker play them off. Oh, that's so fun. Gosh.
It was also one of the first times in the franchise that you actually see how much of a genius Joker is. Like, yeah, he's crazy. Mm-hmm. But this was the first time that you could see, he can actually commit to a bit too. Mm-hmm. And he's a genius. So good for him.
Let's the other ones on this list. Let's go on your guys' list. He had Batman Zero Year by Scott Snyder too.
It's a good one.
Okay. This is Batman Year One by Frank Miller. That's probably one of the best Batman stories ever created. Year One is so good.
Year One is super good, and it's funny because like you see so many movies say, "Oh, we took inspiration from Year One," and I'm like, "Yeah, you did, kind of."
Yeah. Even Nolan did to a certain extent. Nolan has the remnants of it. The Batman has it. Yeah, super influential story. Great story. If anyone has never read this as a trade, buy it. You will not be disappointed. Great art, great storytelling. Just that animated movie did not do this story justice. This book is so damn good.
I mean, the animated movie was still pretty good, but it wasn't as nearly as good as the book. The book, it's funny because like you always see those people like the book was better, and you're like, no, this is actually the truth. The book was way better.
Yeah, books are usually always the better one. Yeah.
But yeah, that was a good one.
Batman Under the Red Hood by Jude Wick.
So good.
Yeah, that's what it was. Death in the Family.
Which one?
It's the initial. Oh, it's the original one where he's holding Jason Todd.
Okay. Very good. It's still wild to me that DC got away with a should he live or should he die? Call in the 800 number, and audiences were like, kill the bitch, and that's what they did. The fact that they didn't know what was going to happen, so they drew the ending both ways.
I think that made Jason Todd more of an interesting character for a lot of people. Was that they actually willingly killed him off and made him come back eventually as an anti-hero.
But that's a funny thing because when he first. The whole idea that he was going to come back spawned from Batman Hush, from that one issue where Clayface was pretending to be him, and then audiences were like, this would be kind of amazing if he came back, and then DC was like, kind of, yeah, let's do it. And they did it. And then they made him a good guy, and there was that full chunk where he was like a bad guy for a while, and he was like, I'm going to take over the city. I'm going to beat the shit. I'm going to be the better Batman.
Yeah.
And then eventually he's like, my bad, Bruce. I'm back. I'll stop killing people. My bad. And Bruce is like, okay, just you know where to park, and just like lets him back in.
So I don't know if you've gone through like some of Tom King stuff. Or if you read Tom King stuff, what is your opinion on him if you have one?
He's good. I mean, Tom King has done some controversial things with some of the comics. I'll give you that. But he does also, when he's given full reign of a story that's not like a crossover, like when he's in charge of like the big crossover events that can have ripple effects, maybe not so good. I think when he's allowed to have just one character to work with, one corner to work with, it's very much like Grant Morrison. When you give him room to explore the character he's good at, like I don't think for a second that Grant Morrison could do a convincing Flash.
Oh, not even close. Yeah.
And that's the same way I feel with Tom King. Like he amazing with the Superman stuff, amazing with the Supergirl stuff. Not so much with the Batman and Flash stuff. So it's like he did really he's got some great stuff.
It's crazy because one of his books, The Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, is going to be made into a movie.
And they're making it based on his original pitch, not the actual book. So Lobo was part of the original pitch. Yeah. And they were like, how do we want to do this story? He's like, can I put Lobo back in? And they're like, yeah, let's put Lobo back in. And that's what they're doing for the movie. So it's like, to me, it's like, we're going to see what Tom King actually had planned for that book before DC said, you can't use Lobo.
This is insane, man. We're going to get an actual live action DC movie of something Tom King wrote. That's crazy. Yep. What timeline is this now? This is a crazy timeline.
One of the things I like to do weekly Q&As on my Instagram. And someone was like, so James Gunn clearly is bringing in comic writers to help with these books. I mean, these movies. Do you think they should do that with the Batman as well? I'm like, they should call Grant Morrison and Scott Snyder and have them consult on the script. They need to do that. Yeah. Whatever their plan is, have those two guys help flesh it out and make it.
Even by what you just said right there, people would think like, oh, but comic book writers, they wouldn't know how to deal with like, guys, if you're making a Batman story, you probably want to call the guy that made some very influential Batman stories. That's perfectly fine.
And I think that people are definitely a little gun shy about it because Jeff Johns was like the golden child of DC.
Yeah.
And then he was invited to be a part of the movie side of things. And we all know how that turned out. So I think people are a little gun shy about allowing some of these people to have some sort of hand in it.
Yeah.
But if you have the person who works in tandem with the scriptwriter and not have them be the scriptwriter, I think you can make it work. Because these guys are masters of their craft, but that doesn't mean I can write an amazing comic, so I can automatically write an amazing screenplay. That's not how it works. So get a good seasoned writer to work with these writers, and then you can make a solid script. Have a team, and teamwork makes the dream work. So
because a lot of people don't understand this. What you just talked about right there is some skills are just not transferable. Like Grant Morrison probably can write a great Batman story. Probably can't write a great movie script, but totally different.
Right. Apples and oranges.
And the last thing we'll talk about here today, this is the Superman trailer finally came out for James Gunn's Superman film coming out this year. Did you like it?
I did. I thought it was great. I thought it was I loved how there were so many callbacks and so many throwbacks to like the legacy of Superman, basically. Like I can see why he initially called it Superman Legacy, because it really felt like, just with that trailer, you're like, this is like every bit of him. Like you could see some of the original like 1940s, like the old school cartoons with like the Superman fighting the kaiju. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's do this. You saw Krypto, you saw other heroes acknowledging his existence, and you saw like the trailer was interesting. But what I think is going to work here is that the problem that people had with Zack Snyder's Superman was that, yes, it was dark, it was topical, it was all of these things. But the thing that they probably didn't like a lot was the decision to make Superman kind of regret being Superman. And then in this trailer, you can see that this is the guy that's still trying to be Superman, regardless of the world that's beating him down. Like he's chosen, like I'm Superman. People can hate me, but I'm still going to be Superman, and I'm still going to stand up for what I am. I'm not going to question my own views. I'm not going to question if I should do this or not. I'm going to do it until I'm down on the ground bleeding. And that it's a very different angle to approach it, where you still are trying to tell the same story, but the way the character is depicted is more faithful to the comic.
I actually enjoyed the trailer myself. I think it displayed Superman in three different aspects: vulnerable, saving people, and he's actually interacting with, you know, his family, obviously. And I think those are great moments because you know this as well as I do, because people keep talking about it like it's just not happening. They always say Superman's invulnerable, he can't be hurt, and he can't be hurt. It's like he showed you the first part of the trailer, he can be hurt. He's a guy that's vulnerable, you know?
They started the trailer with a Yamcha pose. He's getting his ass beat.
People's biggest complaint was that he's too strong, and it's like if people still complain about that after seeing this, it's like I don't know if people want it as Superman anymore. If they know the baseline of him, as long as the movie shows what he is, I think it's fine. I think the only problem potentially that James Gunn might run into, because people have mentioned, is the ensemble thing. But James Gunn has only ever done ensembles, actually. So I don't know why getting a bigger ensemble would make it different. It's actually quite opposite. Not a lot of directors can do ensembles very well. Most ensemble super movies end up being not that good at all. Like look at some of those past X-Men movies, like Last Stand. That was an ensemble of just of something. Let's just say.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I see this film and I see what he's doing with it, and the more I look into it, the more I hear about it. These characters that we're going to be seeing so much in the film, they're going to be supporting characters, but they're going to be bigger than cameos, but smaller than co-stars. If that makes sense. So like they'll be part of the story, but they're not going to be like, I don't know how to put it. Like there's going to be very limited screen time, but it's not going to be one or two scenes. It's not going to be a cameo. Yeah. It's going to be like, okay, so the kaiju is attacking and the Justice Society shows up and Superman's also there. And then afterwards, they're like, dude, just join the team. Why are you not doing this? And then like at the end, they're going to be there again and be like, hey, you were right. Maybe we should not be a part of this team. So you're going to have like character development for these other characters, but they're not going to be like, I'm going to travel with you through the whole movie and be your buddy. Like that's not what it's going to be.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how I think audiences see these other heroes and see this lived in Superman world and then realize that, okay, these other heroes aren't going to be, I don't know, like maybe like Hawkeye's role from Civil War is kind of a good example.
Oh, I
like,
saying. Yeah.
He's there. He's got a few scenes, but he doesn't steal the show and he's not front and center of the entire movie.
Mm-hmm. Because that's the thing with ensemble superhero movies that made them fail before, essentially, was that certain directors would try to give them so much screen time that it took away from another one. Where it's like if you just give them all the same screen time and just make whatever they're doing integral to the plot, if they're trying to help him with whatever goal he's trying to achieve, that's all you really have to do. I mean, like I've read the same things similar to with James Gunn. I read his interview he did with The Wrap. Honestly, he won me over with that interview he did with The Wrap. He sounds like, from what I read, he knows what he's doing. He really wants to deliver a good Superman movie.
He said all the right things. And
yeah, now just if the product can be good, that's all that matters, right?
Exactly.
Man. Yeah. But that's the thing, man, is like when the movie comes out, and let's say word of mouth is generally pretty good and most people think it's good, do you think that's enough to like reignite the DC fan base to go back to the theaters actually afterwards too? Because the next movie is going to be what? I think Clayface or something like that? Supergirl, something like that. Yeah.
So they're starting filming Supergirl tomorrow. It's going to be starting up in the UK this week, and so far they've got a lot of confidence in it. Clayface is supposed to start filming later this year once they tap a good director for it, and right now I think it's they're big. They're really hoping that Superman is enough, because if Superman succeeds, then the studio will have enough capital to make the next wave of things. And a lot of people were like, oh, why is Batman not being front and center? Why is this? 'Cause the story that they're trying to tell with Batman, like the Batman and Son, Damian Wayne,
Grant Morrison run. Oh God, you
that
time with that
requires a budget because there's man bats everywhere in that story. So if you're telling me that that's the next project, that has to be the next project, and you're telling me that the studio that has to make it is the one that's been having financial troubles, that means that the project that's coming out that is finished has to succeed before they move forward with this next one. So I don't think it's going to fail. Like, bottom line, I think it's going to do great. Superman has already surpassed expectations in terms of view count and positive word of mouth for the trailer. That's a huge thing. So hopefully it's enough. And I think when the screenings start happening, the actual screenings, not the nonsense rumors that they say the screenings happen and they're terrible. That's not real. When the actual press junkets come out, the actual reviews, and people say, yeah, this is exactly what we wanted from this, people are going to show up.
So it'll for sure be doing better than Captain America 4. I think everyone knows that. There's no way.
There's so much bad word of mouth right now with Captain America because of all the different cuts that movie has gone through. All the I'm still surprised that they're going all gung ho on it, but I don't know.
Good Lord. MCU recently has just been just an actual roller coaster. To think that they had their lowest grossing movie just only about a year ago. And then they're like, you know what? No more. People don't like Miss Marvel. It's like, yeah, I could have told you that for free.
That's not the lesson you guys should learn. We like Miss Marvel. We don't like Captain Marvel. We don't like dumb movies. Because the problem with that movie was that it was nonsensical. Like, I sat down and watched it.
Yeah.
The whole musical number planet made zero sense for the plot. And the plot was also just the same plot as Spaceballs.
Oh, gosh.
The bad guy sucking air out of another planet because their planet's out of air. Like, that's Spaceballs, guys. We saw that movie in the 80s.
What the heck? God.
Yeah. It was like they had pieces to make a good movie, and they kind of just shot the bed with it.
So, last few things I'll ask you before we head out in a little bit is, do you have anything planned coming up in 2025 you want to let the audience know about?
Well, we're still doing our podcast network. The network is actually fully expanded. So we have Cultured Nerd Podcast, the This That Type of Talk, the Cultured Gamer, the Cultured Pull List, and the Through the Monocle. Those shows are all running simultaneously now, and we're trying to get them all going once a week. We're also starting up TCN Rundowns, where I'm going to be doing quick 8 to 10 minute videos giving a rundown on a certain topic. And then just kind of short form, like, here it is, here's the info, moving on. So we're trying to hit the ground running as fast as we can with a lot of this stuff and give it the content that people want.
Yeah, I know there was the James Gunn bullshit going out there. Yeah, there's test screenings out there now, and Taylor went out there. It's like, no, what you guys are hearing are bullshit.
It's nonsense, guys. Come on. They literally had a screening for the executives. That's all it was. It was a special screening for the executives. The cut is nowhere near to the point where they're going to start inviting random people.
There's no way. Not at this point.
No,
yeah,
it's not yet. Give it a few more weeks, maybe in February.
And they're going to play this. They have to play this movie close to the chest. They have to, because the moment, even though I don't think it's going to be bad either, I actually think it's going to be a pretty good movie. They don't want any bad word of mouth to come out about this movie at all. They're gonna. This is like their biggest shot at reviving DC live action again. Yeah.
And it's interesting because I've got a handful of spoilers that were given to me by people who worked on the film, and some of the twists in this film are just going to be so damn fun. Like, there's so many cool things that people are going to see and be like, okay, here we go. This is good.
That's good here. I like it.
To me, I think one of my favorite aspects is that the movie's probably going to end very much like the first episode of Superman, where Superman's flying on Lex's balcony saying, I know you did this. I can't put you in jail because I can't prove it, but I'm watching you.
And
they're going to do something like that where Lex is like, oh, you suck. Okay, next week I'll kill you again. Like, because he's a journalist and he has to run by proof. So he can't write the story unless there's proof.
Yeah.
And Lex is doing his Lexness in the dark. And that's it's so unlike in BVS, where Lex very publicly tried to kill things and do shady crap. This is Lex that's going to be like Wilson Fisk / the Kingpin. Like, there's a duality there where he can get away with things because people know he divided himself that way. So,
man, I'm ready for a banger. I can't wait. I was actually super excited to watch the teaser trailer. I hadn't been that hyped to watch a trailer in a while, honestly. I was like, man, most trailers just kind of watch and just you do your thing. But like, man, I was actually excited to watch this trailer. I can't wait for the next one. I want to just be blown away. I hope this next trailer that they have, they do the recommendations for comic books, because they used to do them.
Yeah, I like
They
that.
didn't do it this time around. I was like, James, what are you doing? I thought he put the
They also
content
didn't put.
recommendations
They
there.
also didn't put the name of the movie in the trailer. Did you notice
That's
that?
true.
Like,
I did notice that. Yeah.
they just wanted people to be aware that Superman was coming back to theaters and DC Studios was making it. So I think the next trailer is going to be more of a, probably more of a plot related trailer where they kind of give you some info on what's happening.
Mhm.
And then, I mean, because James Gunn even said this first trailer, most of the movie, with the exception of a few other little bits, are all like in the first act of the film.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the only part that's not in the first act is when Ultraman is socking him in the baseball stadium. That's later in the film. But aside from that, like most of this movie, most of what we saw in this trailer was like the first 30 minutes. So to me, that's you already hooked that many people in the first 30 minutes. Awesome.
Yeah, because you don't want to fall into that trap of like, hey, I showed the whole movie to you in the trailer, like Blue Beetle did, because that was not good.
Or what they did with BVS, and like our final trailer is literally the best scene of the movie, and we're just going to show you the uncutted Batman glory, and then just at the end of it say Batman. Like, like I like that trailer a lot because it's like it's just a short form version of the best scene of the movie, but it's also a short form version of the best scene of the movie. So it's
final question, man, is do you have any shout outs you want to give to anyone in particular and anything else you want to say before we end the show?
Well, the only shout outs that I have are from my team at the podcast. They're awesome. And there's so many shows that we're running right now, and every one of them are harder workers than I am. So I'm just so excited and so privileged to be with all them.
So what you're saying is you're essentially a cloud chaser.
So much. I don't do anything. I show up and look good, and they do all the work for me.
That's my job. What the heck? Oh my god.
No, I just say head over to our channel. We rebranded it to the Cultured Universe because there's so much going on in it that we had to. It can't be one show anymore because there's so much of it we're doing. We had to rebrand it as the brand, and the show itself is still itself. So we basically are now the Cultured Universe Podcast Network, and all of these shows are just, every one of them are so great. So we have a little bit for everybody. That's all I gotta say.
No bias at all there. Saying every single thing he does is great. So Taylor does here. I love it, man. He's like, I just did a podcast network. It's actually the best thing in the world. Actually, everything else they do is also very good.
They're so good, like the best.
Oh gosh, man, I hate it. But you know what? At least you didn't sink $25 million into a biopic about a monkey, man. At least you're not Paramount. Who probably has even worse money troubles than Warner Brothers. God,
well, they're in the midst of getting merged with another studio, and
yeah,
so we'll see what this is. Probably one of those final nails where the studio that's coming in is like, so we're going to be the captain now. We can't trust you guys, so.
Before we head out, I'm just saying right now, if anyone listens to this, if anyone wasted $25 million on that, there's at some point you got to be fired. Come on, that's just like one of those nail in the coffin. It's like, okay, you got to move on. You just cost us like millions of dollars on a horrible idea.
Oh, well, it's like the guy who was working at Sony who did all the villain films. He finally left, and they were like, to me, when he's like, "Oh, he quit," I'm like, "No, he didn't quit, guys. He got
that's one of those like."
Out.
There's a call up, sir. All your movies bombed except for like one. You're fired. That's it. He told this other company he was let go.
We're gonna let you have the dignity to say that you quit, but your desk is already cleared for you.
We hired a person of color. No, don't go down that road. But it's great talking to a culture nerd. It's always fun having these talks. You know, at least a level-headed person to talk to, not some crazy weirdo like everything's gonna be bad and trash. It's like, okay, we're gonna have one of those conversations now, but never that when we're having a conversation. But yeah, man, can't wait to have you on again later on this year at some point whenever you're a free time. Thank you guys for checking out this episode of the MSK Show, and we'll see you.